Welcome back to this UCAT tutorial by MedicMind as part of our verbal reasoning course. So through lots of research by the MedicMind team into the inner workings of the UCAT, we spotted a common theme within some of the language that are used in the questions. We call this extreme language, and that's what this tutorial today is going to cover. So what do we actually mean when we say extreme language? Well, there's certain types of words that are used in questions that can actually point us towards the answer itself by just looking at the question. So as an example of this, we've got two statements here. One would be using extreme language and one using mild language. So our extreme statement, UCL Medical School is the best medical school in the UK. Our mild in comparison, UCL Medical School is one of the best. So hopefully you can see the difference between using the word best, being very definitive and saying it's the absolute top in the UK, and one of the best, being slightly milder, still saying it's in the top ranks, but not being so definitive about it. Slide 3. So here at MedicMind, we refer to those as mild phrases versus extreme phrases. As a general rule, mild phrases are more likely to be true, whereas extreme phrases are more likely to be false or can't tell. So some examples of what mild phrases would be using the words might, could, sometimes, one-off. And on the other hand, some examples of extreme phrases would be will always, definitely, every time, the biggest. So it's important to say that even though these phrases can sometimes point towards the answer being true for mild or false or can't tell for extreme, these are not steadfast rules. Some mild phrases can definitely come up in false or can't tell statements, and on the contrary, some extreme phrases can absolutely come up in true statements. But it's a good tactic to use in order to give you more confidence in your answer by just looking at the question language itself. It's also worth noting that of course question statements can have completely neutral language that wouldn't fall into either mild or extreme phrases. So there's some questions where you wouldn't even be able to use extreme language technique at all. But when you can apply it, it's a real confidence boosting and time saving technique. So here's an example from a past UCAT consortium question. Seeing a product used in a popular television programme will always increase the demand for the product. So here, the extreme language is the use of the phrase will always. This is saying that under any circumstance, in all situations, if you see something on TV, the demand for it will increase. That would take a lot for that to be true, and even from our common knowledge, we'd probably say it's not going to always increase the demand. So this one, we'd be leaning more towards false or can't tell. However, if it was replaced with milder language, such as might or could increase the demand for the product, we'd be more likely to believe that it's true, as it's just a bit more believable overall. Hopefully with this one, Nike running shoes are the best in the market. You can pretty clearly see that the extreme language here would be the best in the market. Again, that takes a lot to say and it's quite a big statement to make. If it was replaced with one of the best, it would be far more believable and we'd be far more likely to think that it's true. But this current statement, we would personally lean towards false or can't tell as the more likely option. So one final example before we move on to some questions. PlayStation 1 is no longer used in the UK. Now at first glance, it may seem like there's not really any extreme language in this statement. However, there is an extreme phrase. Saying something is no longer used at all would imply that absolutely nobody in the UK is currently using PlayStation 1. Now again, from common knowledge, this is extremely unlikely to say that absolutely nobody is using it, that we can be confident that no one is using it. So even though it's not one definitive word, we can look at this entire statement as being just a bit of an extreme statement. So with this one, again, we'd be more likely to lean towards false or can't tell, as it's just not really believable. So with this one, if we were to change it to milder language, we could say that it was rarely used. This would imply that there may still be some people out there that are using it, and we're not making a catch-all statement saying absolutely no one is using it. If it said rarely used, we would be more likely to lean towards it possibly being true. So now that we've got a good understanding of what extreme language is in theory, let's put that straight into practice. As always, if you want to give it a go yourself, pause the video here and then come back when you're ready for the answer. So hopefully you can pretty easily see from this question that we do have an extreme phrase here. 2 hours of PE are no longer done at any UK school. No longer done implies that it's absolutely nowhere in the country, no school in the UK is currently offering 2 hours of PE. So from just the question alone, we would be leaning towards false or can't tell. But we've still got to go to the passage in order to confirm that. So here we'd actually have to scan through almost the entire passage, and in the very last paragraph, you'll have probably spotted that SSP has ended the recommendation for 2 hours of PE in schools each week. So we know that they've ended the recommendation. That doesn't exactly say that 2 hours of PE is no longer done. That would be a big assumption for us to make. So we've got to go with our gut of extreme language and it being too big an assumption, and we're going to have to go with can't tell for this answer. So again, if you want to have a go, pause the video here and come back when you're ready. So from reading this statement, I would probably say this has some mild language in it. Michael Gove has some control over sports, not all control, some control. So this one could be a bit more believable and would be probably leaning towards true, just based on the question alone. But we still have to go to the passage and see what we think there. So here, in our second paragraph, we've been told that Education Secretary Michael Gove is expected to announce a new strategy for school sport later this month. So if he's announcing a new strategy, I think it's pretty safe to say he has some sort of control over sports in schools. He has some influence over what happens in schools. So by inference, we could probably confidently say that this one is true. Of course, if the language in the question was slightly changed and it said Michael Gove has full control over sports in schools, we would have to go with can't tell. We know he has some influence, but introducing that extreme language would point us straight towards can't tell. So hopefully now you have a good understanding of what extreme language actually is and how it's applied in the verbal reasoning section. It's a difficult concept to get your head around, but once you're confident in using it, you'll find that you become much more confident in any answers you select where the question may use extreme or mild language. And it can also provide a good guessing tactic, which we'll cover in a tutorial a lot later on. But for now, thanks for joining us again, and I look forward to welcoming you back for lesson 5.